Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Lucia Lupetti, postdoctoral design researcher at the U Delft, and I'm going to present you our work on designerly ways of knowing in HRI. I'm presenting this also on behalf of Cristina Zaga and Natalie Cila. First, I would like to clarify what do we mean by designerly HRI. With these terms, we refer to the body of work in HRI that has a strong orientation towards design. For instance, work developing novel robotic artifacts and/or engaging with design methodologies. We will address this topic by illustrating how designerly work is reported and validated in HRI, specifically in the HRI conference community. We will discuss what design knowledge is, especially focusing on the concept of intermediate level knowledge. We will suggest desirable practices to legitimize designerly HRI work, and we will conclude suggesting a call to action to investigate the conceptual implications of designerly HRI. To understand how design practices are interpreted and approached in HRI, we looked at how design has been described so far in the dedicated track at the HRI conference. Looking at the description, we can see how in the first years, designerly HRI work was addressed as contributions describing new designs, including morphologies, behaviors, or services. So initially, design was mostly approached as a means for investigation, not yet acknowledged as a distinct discipline able to generate specific knowledge. From 2017 onwards, however, the view on design changed. It expanded to also include reflection on the design process itself, which was very important because it also opened up opportunities for bringing and exploring methods that, although already popular in design research and HCI, were still alien to the field of HRI, such as critical and speculative design. And in this broadening process, design started to be approached not only as a means for investigation, rather as an object of investigation itself. Yet, this broader view on designerly contributions can still be found in a very limited amount of works. And we believe that this is because, as HRI design researchers, we still need to develop a richer understanding of what designerly knowledge is and how to produce it. In fact, the majority of HRI work still follows a process that looks pretty much like this. We define a problem or a question, we build an artifact or interactions, we test, analyze, and iterate on these steps until we get the results we want. But in design research, especially research through design, we do have a phase where we define a problem. Yes, we frame a situation and then develop some artifacts and interactions. But after that, we do not necessarily engage with the traditional testing phase. We rather engage in various forms of reflections on the processes and the produced artifacts. And I specified research through design because some of you might or not be aware that there are multiple ways of conducting research in design. Christopher Freiling in the 90s provided us a useful distinction between research for, into, and through design, but it is this last type, we believe, that is the most distinctively designerly one. In fact, as Gaver states, in research through design, we look at the design outcomes as something embodying the designer's judgment. To make it short, a framing of a situation and interpretation and reflections on these results allow to articulate a range of topical, procedural, pragmatic, and conceptual insights. But the challenge, of course, is how to make such designerly insights explicit and relevant for design and other disciplines, in this case, HRI. In this regard, we suggest to look at the concept of intermediate level knowledge, which was coined by Kia Hook and Jonas Logren to describe the types of knowledge produced by design, which in most of cases resides in between the abstraction of theories and the concreteness of instances. You might be familiar with many of them, such as methods, guidelines, patterns, heuristics, and experiential qualities, while you might be less familiar with criticism, for instance, which consists of an expert judgment of a given work or set of works based on a holistic view of a domain, or strong concepts, which are generic design ideas, overall organizing principles that can be extrapolated by specific instances and potentially be applied to several projects. And probably very few may be familiar with the concept of annotated portfolios, which are collections of designs presented through a medium appropriate for communication, such as a booklet, and accompanied by brief annotations. If we contextualize these in HRI, we can see how only design methods and tools are relatively well-established forms of knowledge. Others, like heuristics, patterns, guidelines, and experiential qualities, are less frequently addressed, explicitly generated, and we can barely find examples of criticisms, strong concepts, and annotated portfolios in HRI literature. So what we believe is that by acknowledging designer investigations as a distinctive way of producing knowledge, HRI could systematically reflect on its processes and insights to make them more explicit and more generalizable. But to do that, to properly legitimize designerly HRI work, researchers should engage with three key actions, at least. A thorough documentation of the design process, a clear articulation of the motivations for engaging with design practices, and an explicit positioning of the work in relation to existing intermediate level forms of knowledge in HRI. And especially this last point, we believe, is crucial because it represents an opportunity for gaining awareness about the potential value of a research, and most of all, it can unveil under-investigated areas of concern or underexplored methods within HRI. As emerged in our discussion, for instance, criticisms, strong concepts, and annotated portfolios are mostly missing. Yet, these are potentially relevant types of knowledge as they are grounded in instances, but at the same time, they embody high conceptual value. In fact, just briefly looking at existing HRI artifacts, we can see an interesting divide between commercial robotic platforms, which tend to reinforce stereotypes, controversial imaginaries of either servile machines or friendly artificial companions, and many HRI research artifacts that, in their experimental embodiments and behaviors, challenge our assumptions of what the look, expressivity, and purpose of a robot should be. So criticism and annotated portfolios could help us reflect on these conceptual implications of designerly HRI work. But of course, engaging with these forms of knowledge is not free from methodological challenges. There is no ready-to-implement way to engage with them. Criticism, in fact, brings up questions of what is to be considered as an interface, how to approach the notion of use, or who is to be considered as an expert. While annotated portfolios come with questions about the appropriateness of selecting certain artifacts or certain authors for the annotations, and how to address robot dynamism when the medium allows to present only static pictures. Nevertheless, these very challenges are what we believe should be on HRI design researchers' agenda. Because, and here I conclude, design can be very useful to HRI if acknowledged as distinct discipline with its way of producing knowledge. It could help explicate HRI knowledge, especially residing in artifacts and design processes. But to do that, much should be borrowed from HCI and design research literature, especially the notion of intermediate level knowledge. Yet, designerly HRI should also be approached as a niche research space with its own peculiarities. Only this way we could help advancing both disciplines, design and HRI. So thank you very much for listening. And I would also like to take the chance to thank all the participants and invited speakers who took place last year in our first international workshop on designerly HRI. And finally, a very big thank you to the HRI reviewers who helped us improve our paper further.